I'm Jessica DeWitt, one of the editors here at the Network in Canadian History and Environment. And today I am lucky enough to be joined by PearlAnn Reichwein and Charlotte Mitchell. Can you tell us about yourselves?
Hello, I'm a professor at the University of Alberta in the Faculty of Kinesiology, Sport and Recreation. And I'm a historian who's worked on the history of the Mountain West for many years.
Yeah.
And I'm really happy to present today with my colleague, Charlotte Mitchell.
Hi, Jessica. Thanks so much for having me on. I am from Calgary and coming to you from Calgary and Treaty 7 territory today. And I am a PhD candidate in my hopefully final year, looking at the history of Canadian women in ski jumping.
Yeah, awesome, which ties very well into our topics today. So I invited you all today because you're two of the three main people working on the Ski Like a Girl podcast. And we featured like one of the launch back in January, I think it was. And then we had a review of it on our site. And I thought it would be fun to just chat with you guys directly. So I thought we'd just start off, like with the basics. How did this project come into be? And why did the three of you kind of band forces to examine the history of women in Canadian skiing?
Well, thanks for that question. I have always loved the Canadian Rockies. I'm an Alberta girl, and I was fascinated by the history of outdoor pursuits in women's lives, especially in Canada's mountain parks and sport. So I was also practicing cross-country skiing and all kinds of skiing. I love that. Just love winter. And when I was at the Canmore Nordic Centre skiing one day, it really clicked for me that many of Canada's best and best known cross-country skiers were women. And it seemed like it was time to look more closely and delve into the history of women and girls in Nordic skiing sports, especially given that many everyday folks have enjoyed these sports in the past and continue to do so today. So I was attracted by the mass participation element, as well as the stories of some of the exceptional athletes in this Canadian winter sport. I had studied the Alpine Club of Canada and the Banff School of Fine Arts in some earlier work, and I realized that women had a large role in mountain sport, recreation, and tourism. And this seemed like a way to broaden out my work by looking through the lens of Nordic skiing, its many different disciplines, and understanding Canadian history, but starting with the lens of women and girls and their perspectives. Very little had been published on the history of this particular area, and I thought there was a novel opportunity here to begin looking at it through the lives of women and girls, and then broaden out to understand families, communities, and recreation as well as sport more broadly across the country. So that's what we're doing. It led me to write a SSHRC grant, and we are fortunate to have this larger SSHRC grant project, which is just coming to a close. The Ski Like a Girl podcast did start last year, and we're moving into season 2 this year as part of that larger project.
Cool. Anything to add, Charlotte?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think for me, how I kind of connected with PearlAnn and her research on Canadian women and girls in Nordic skiing was I was completing my master's in gender and social justice at the University of Alberta, and kind of serendipitously had met PearlAnn and got to talking about my past as a Canadian national team ski jumping athlete. And she brought up this amazing work that she was doing with the Ski Like a Girl project, and that's how I kind of joined forces and began my PhD on the topic. And so it's been kind of such an exciting opportunity for me to, and I think for all of us, to explore and bridge kind of our personal passions with academia. I think some of the best work always comes out of when that happens. And so, as PearlAnn had mentioned, that we have done season 1 of the podcast, and I'd love to share a little bit more about season 1. We focused on the focus was a century of Alberta stories of women and girls in Nordic skiing.
Mm-hmm.
and was 5 episodes, over 2.5 hours of programming that used original archival, oral history, ethnographic, and fieldwork research. Was kind of built, or was the foundation for building these episodes that we kind of co-wrote and co-created together as a team of 3, and recorded at the studio at the U of A Library Digital Humanities Center. And so that's how we really started on season 1, and we're so excited to launch season 2 here this winter, that will focus more on Canadian Nordic skiers from beginners, volunteers, Olympians, and Paralympians.
Cool. Ooh. I binged. I had listened to a couple of episodes earlier this year, but then I binged all of them again this week, and definitely the personal element comes out, like all of your different, like, in your passion for it, and like the ways that, of course, one of the episodes is fully on you, like very focused on your work and your past experience, Charlotte, and it's really wonderful. And every single episode has such a different flavor to it, and like a different, like it's a different topic, but also like the way that the topics are approached and like presented are a bit different. So it's not, you know how some podcasts are very like very same formula every single time, and I find that this one like switched it up every episode, which kept it really interesting. Yeah, so I was wondering, I've had a few other like podcast people on NiCHE Conversations, and I always like to ask them like basically this question, which is like, what does a podcast offer that a more traditional academic project does not? And also, like, do you think that academia should take podcasts more seriously?
Well, I'll start and give a brief answer and let Charlotte follow. Podcasts are a creative research activity that we find fits very well with public history and reaching broader audiences, inclusive of academics, but also the general public.
Yeah.
And it does play well to shirk expectations for knowledge mobilization serving Canadians, as well as our podcast is worldwide. So I think that podcasting is taken seriously. It's also clear there are different kinds of podcasts. This is an academic podcast, and each one is based on rigorous original research.
Yeah.
As you've heard, Charlotte is working on her doctoral thesis, and we also had Lindsay Conrad, our third member, complete her MA thesis as part of this larger project. And that has been feeding into the podcast along with our other work. Over to you, Charlotte.
Yeah, so I think, the Ski Like a Girl podcast, as we've kind of talked about, is a form of both public history and creative research that shares the stories of women and girls in Nordic skiing. And research, there is some research on academic podcasts, such as those by historian Janice Thiessen, and digital media, that does suggest, podcasting really provides new ways for researchers to engage the public and disseminate research, and also require, expertise when done well, as well as are academically rigorous, as I think we've really demonstrated with the work we've done so far. So they're, I think, quite a form of research, creative research, as well as knowledge mobilization, that create something that's really enjoyable and educational at the same time.
Yeah, I think like the considering of how like different people and then the public, digest information differently, like having a podcast option is so valuable in that way. And it just like brings forth, I don't know, for instance, like you read from, in your podcast, you're reading from historical documents at some points, but it feels very like lively and like real, in a way that like if you were reading an article where these things are quoted, it wouldn't feel the same, right? So it's like it brings a bit of liveliness to some of these topics, I think. And yeah, I think definitely academia is getting more on board with it, and I think doing the reviews and stuff is so important as well. Thinking back to like about a decade ago, like Hannah McGregor at SFU had the Secret Feminist Agenda, which was like very new in that it was peer reviewed at the end of every season. And I remember that being like a really big deal. And I think we've come like a long way in the last decade, but there's still more to go. And there's also like, I think, an issue with the fact that people are not, unless you're specifically getting funded for this kind of project, the resources and the training for it aren't there as much. Like for a NiCHE, for example, you know, our submissions are open to any type of submission, from written to audio to visual, you know, like the whole spectrum. But still, like 99.5% of submissions that we get are written, you know, like the traditional blogs. And I think a lot of that is just like resources and training, and it takes more time to create a podcast. It takes these different skills, or you might have to have other people come in who have more technical skills. And I think there's still room for that kind of support. But yeah, anyways, it's good stuff. And I think it's, yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead, Pearl.
Just to add to what you're saying, really interesting. The university library at University of Alberta has been a strong backbone for our technical work. In the Digital Humanities Center, they have classes and workshops, but they also have the resources such as a podcast kit with microphones and recording devices. And we spend a lot of time in their small sound booth, which is kind of like a sweatbox where we get inside, close the door, and work away on our audio. One of the things that you're touching on too is that podcasting is an oral form of knowledge sharing and storytelling. It's oral. We listen, and there is, I think, a human quality to listening to stories. That's one of the basic ways we share narratives and across cultures.
Yes.
So when I think about the Ski Like a Girl podcast, it's opened up ways to enter our scholarly work into the digital media world, and we get to share it free online with worldwide open access through the University of Alberta Library and Spotify. And this has been enormous in terms of trying to access the whole public. I think one of the takeaways of the pandemic was we can transcend geography if we use technology and make it available to everyone. So that's one of the aspirational ideals of podcasting as public historians. Similarly, we want to make it free and open, just like public libraries. And we are scholars working at a public university, so we put ourselves in the position of recognizing our role within the community. We are part of that community, and we are co-creating and sharing knowledge back and forth in different ways. Our podcast is great graduate training as well. So these are skills you can take with you after your history degree or whatever your training might be, and maybe turn it around in various different kinds of work and career opportunities.
Absolutely.
I've also noticed our podcast has generated excitement in the news, in radio, and with TV coverage, and in ways I never would have expected. It's just generated so much excitement. For instance, a global TV piece about our podcast was replayed on the Jumbotron in the middle of an Edmonton Oilers game at Rogers Place with more than 18,000 sport fans. So what an outreach for women's sport history to talk with people who love sport. It was amazing. Never would have expected that. And in this way, we're reaching out to a large audience, larger than I could reach in my classroom or conferences or a peer-reviewed journal article. But I think the point is all of these forms of publication and communication are highly important. And in a digital world, podcasts are a digital form for scholars to speak with their audiences, but also to listen into their audiences. And I think Charlotte has a great anecdote that would illustrate that.
Yeah, so I think something that was part of the most rewarding part of our work for me so far on the podcast has been connecting with some of our community through our Instagram account. So we have our Instagram, the Ski Like a Girl podcast, and we post links and photos and to our podcast and our website as well. And after an episode, I had someone reach out asking if her mom could be, featured on the podcast because she was a Nordic skier and had this huge history of teaching and kind of a life of Nordic skiing. And so we connected with her, and she was on our Canadian Birkebeiner episode. And I think that kind of connection and reciprocal reciprocity has been was so incredible to see, and was really full circle.
Neat. Oh, that's an awesome story. Yeah, I love the different, I focus most of my work on public history, so I absolutely love those different, unexpected connections that you'll make with people. And when you really spark their imagination or spark a memory or make them feel seen or what have you, like it's so nice and neat. It's such a wonderful part of this work. So I think that kind of plays into like my final question, which was I just wanted to know, like, what was your favorite part of the project, and like what brought you the most joy, excitement, or like sense of accomplishment?
Well, we have an upcoming article in the Journal of Sport History that will talk more in depth and theorize the Ski Like a Girl podcast, along with the other public history activities we've undertaken, including a mobile museum and giving talks and Jane's walks in the local communities we served. We've also gone farther afield to the Banff Mountain Film Festival and Golden, British Columbia to participate and contribute to local festival and commemoration there. But I do think my favorite thing about the whole podcast was working with my team. For a professor, this has just been the dream project. I'm able to work with talented students, and the co-learning in a feminist collaborative like this has been incredible. Often as historians, we work solo. This has really been a collaborative team effort. And one of my favorite things was on Friday afternoon, I would often have a draft podcast sound file drop into my email, and that night I would cozy up in a big armchair and listen to these very different styles as Lindsay and Charlotte began to bring their work forward. And as you mentioned, we all have a little bit different style, and we've been experimenting with different formats and learning as we go along. So that's been a fabulous experience for me. And I have to say, I also enjoyed the meticulous performance and sound takes that are required, because it is a voice performance, and we are also involved in the co-production process, selecting music and providing a mood as well as an emotional experience as you engage intellectually in the ideas we're presenting with these stories. Over to you, Charlotte.
Yeah, so I think as I shared, really connecting with our community has been a real highlight for me, as well as kind of launch day of episodes. I think those are so exciting. It's a really accumulation of so many hours of work, whether it's, research work in the archives, conducting interviews, script writing, many revisions, audio editing, which, as you spoke about a little bit, kind of is a skill that is required for podcasts. And Lindsay and I and PearlAnn really kind of learned these things on the fly, and are working, continually working on perfecting our craft in audio editing. And then, really finally releasing the episode, and just reactions from friends and family and community who are so excited, to hear these stories that they didn't know before or they had heard of but are learning more. So I think that's really been the highlight for me for the podcast.
Cool. Wonderful. Okay, so when is season 2 coming out?
Season 2 will be launching before Christmas, so stay tuned to our Ski Like a Girl podcast website for more updates and the links to the free launch party information that we'll be posting there. Plus, you could, as Jessica has demonstrated, if you like, binge watch season 1, listening into season 1, if you like, or you can just join us whenever you're ready. And one of the wonderful things about podcasting is the listeners come to it when it's good for them. As have talked to people who can only listen to a podcast when they're multitasking, doing their housework, or when they're traveling. So whatever the case may be, this podcast comes to you on the road, wherever you may be, and tries to meet you as you're going through your daily life.
Awesome. It was also making me think, are either of you in the Mountain Voices collection that's coming out next month? Do you know what I'm talking about? The Mountain Voices, the Mountain Legacy Project?
No, but we were part of the University of Calgary Press's Canadian Mountain Assessment, which is an extraordinary and first-time effort to consolidate knowledge about every mountain region across Canada, from the Cape Breton Highlands to the Arctic and the West Coast. And we found it to be a fabulous opportunity, also engaging with Indigenous knowledge keepers. And Canadian Mountain Assessment was presented recently at the International Mountain Conference in Innsbruck, Austria, and Charlotte and I were very happy to attend there for the keynote presentation and listen in to Graham, who is the one of the lead writers of that book.
Nice, cool. Okay, well, you let me know when season 2 comes out. I can always publicize NiCHE for you all and let everyone know that it's out. And yeah, thank you for joining me today. This was a really lovely conversation.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having us, and looking forward to the snow coming as winter is approaching again. So tune in.
Yeah, almost ski season.
Yeah.
It's a documentation of winter, really.
Yes. Okay. Take care, you two. Talk again. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.